Buddy. Good morning, everybody. This is Windows 10, new features, Windows Universal Applications. Glenn Rathke is going to be going through some of the new features and functions of the Windows 10 Universal apps. A couple of things as we go along. The developer conference in February is rapidly approaching. Give us a holler, let us know, and get signed up for it. We have a limited number of seats, about 10 each, and that's it. So make sure we know that. The rest of the time, I'm just going to turn it over to Glenn and let him go after it. Go ahead, Glenn.
Well, good morning. And as Andy said, we've got the Developers Conference coming up February 6th, 7th, and 8th, 2017. And we do have limited seating. And in my coding camp, because we have 3 of them going simultaneously, is we will be doing the basic training like we've done before, although it's very condensed. We'll be covering WX. And so it will be WD the first day, WB the second day, WD WINDEV Mobile, or WM Mobile the third day. And in there, part of that, we will be covering Windows Universal Apps. And so today, I wanted to actually give you a hook for that. 2 hooks with this. One, how easy it is to start creation and creating a Windows Universal application. And I believe I'm going to try and move this over also for Android and iOS at some point. But I wanted to capitalize on what PCSoft has done along with Microsoft for the Windows platform. And the one thing I want to show is how easy it can be with the tools that we're providing at the conference. So that's the other hook. 1, to show you how simple this is. 2, the tools, if you attend the conference, you will be receiving these. So when you read a book, you're not supposed to really read the end first and then start, right? That just ruins everything. Well, today we are going to do that. I'm going to show you the end result. And my feeling is how simple it is to start using and creating Windows Universal applications. So that means it works on the Windows 10 PCs or higher. It works on the phone, the tablet, Xbox, and even HoloLens. So what I want to do is show you what we've got created here. So what I will do is create a new window. And let's just do a new window here. And so for those of you who haven't gotten into PCSoft products, this might be a good exposure as a starting point of what we can do. So I'm starting here with a window, with a template, a window template that I've created. This will be given to you at the conference. So we will select that template. And so since this is a predefined template already, it has the basic controls that I need for my application. And what they've done here with the Universal Apps is they've actually, if we go to Window here and we go to Layouts, we can add layouts to a basic window or any window. And you'll see that there's choices we have. We want to create layouts or we want to use anchors only. Well, I've not done the use anchors only. I create the layouts. And so what it does is it gives us that selection. And you'll notice on the right-hand side now, these are the different layouts it gave us, the different formats. So without us having to create anything additional, right? It gave us 4 layouts that we can use. Now, the cool thing is when you run your application on whatever device you run it, it automatically knows the layout that you're going to use. So there is no code that I have to write that says, hey, if it's this platform, grab this layout. If it's this platform, grab this layout. If it's rotating, so it's portrait or landscape, it does it automatically. So we grab the template and I've got my basic controls on here and it's a great starting point. Now, as we're talking about the Universal Apps and this great starting point, and yes, these are basic applications. They get data in and out pretty nicely. Those of you coming to the conference in February, Andy covers mobile computing and he delves into it at a higher level than what I'm doing here, but this will give us the basics. So anyway, here's our form with our controls on it, and we will modify this. So what we're wanting to do is, since there's three different types of ways to get the data. One is Hyperfile Classic, and you use that locally. Two is Hyperfile SQL, so you use a server for that. Or three is web services. And so that's what I'm going to be using here as web services, and to show you how simple it can be to implement these. So there's code that you would normally have to write. And when we're finished with this, we'll go back and look at the different ways and the different codes that you write. But what we've done is we actually have a code generator that we put into the environment. And so now what we can do is you point to your analysis, right? You select the tables that you want to work with, and I'm going to work with the people table here. And all I want to show in the browse, which is a looper, I want to show the first name, the last name, and the sysid. So what I'm going to do is I'm just building my structure graphically. And everything that we're seeing in this code generator, we have covered and will cover in our training classes, including the coding camp in February. So now these are the three fields that we want to work with on the browse screen. And then I say, what field do I actually want to search by when I do a QBE lookup? And this is really just one field for looking up. So I want to search by the last name. And then I put the sort fields that I want. I want to sort it on the last name and the first name. So that's all there is to selecting what tables and fields and sort orders you want to work with. We'll generate the code. It's now on the clipboard. So if I come now into my application in my window procedure and I do Control V, there's all the code that it just generated. So this is code you do not have to write if you use the generator and you use the window template that we're including. So now we'll save this. Okay, we'll just save it as no name 1. Now all I have to do is to link the controls to my data, and my data is coming back, and we'll look at that in a structure. Okay, so let's got to override this control. Okay, so now I can go into my content, and all I have to do is select what my stored variable is, which is going to be the sysid, so it knows which record we're working with. Okay. Now I'm going to go and overload this control, and I'm going to actually link it to the sysid. And so I want to put in 2 more fields. So I'm just going to copy this, and we're going to put in the last name, and we're going to put in the first name. Okay. So we'll go to this, and we'll link first name. We'll go over here. We'll link the last name. Okay. Now we're ready to run this. Say yes, we'll do that. So here's the one layout that I'm working with. So you can see it that it's in landscape mode for a tablet. I'm now going to search the data. So that's the web service that returned 4 records for us up from SQL Server, wherever that server happens to be sitting, North, South Carolina somewhere, I think. And then we can go and modify the record, right? It brings it up. And this is the next portion that I want to work with the code generator, is to actually generate as much code as we can for the maintenance form. So really, we've not handwritten any code that we need to get this done. We've not had to create any controls on the window to get it done. We've just used our control template. Now, granted, it's a simple application, but in Universal Windows applications or Windows Universal application, the way to display data is in a looper. They do not have a table control, and I'm thinking, why don't they have a table control? Well, after researching the design of Universal Windows applications, Microsoft doesn't offer a table. They offer a repeating area, so the looper actually fulfills that. Now, there's a few things that I'd like to do. We'll come back to this later, and I want to show you now how you would actually start building a universal application. So let me just close this down, this one here. Let's start a new one. Now, I think Microsoft has done a good job, but PCSoft has done a phenomenal job leveraging what Microsoft has here. So we want to start here. We're going to create a universal Windows 10 app. And whether it's called Windows Universal Apps or Windows Universal Platform, that's what they're talking about because it works on all the devices from Microsoft. But it's got to be from Windows 10 up. I believe PCSoft offered this when Microsoft offered it when it was version 8.1 of Windows, but it's gotten better since. And there's still a few things that I'd like to see added into here. Okay, we'll step through this wizard. Let me just go back and just give it a new name. Step through here. Oh, here is we have to point to the SDK for Windows 10 development. And then here's the link. Where do I find the SDK? The thing is, when you do get the SDK, if the link happens to be broken at some point, make sure it is the SDK for Windows 10. If you put in the SDK for 8.1, it's not compatible. This will not work. Okay, and so we can generate an application for phones, tablets, and PC. We can generate an application for phones only, for tablets and PCs. And basically what they're doing is they're just going to be presenting to you what type of window template you'll be using, whether it's the tablet or the phone. What I had showed you before, when we actually added the layout, we can add layouts to any one of these to make it that we can work it on all those different platforms. So you're just not stuck here, but we'll leave it as for phones, tablets, and PCs. I'm not going to use the SCM at this point. I'll use a standard charter. Okay, I'm just using a default that we've got here. I'll keep the King's English, and I will use an existing database. We will use the analysis. There we go, for my application. Yep, I know it's read-only. So you would create a window. I'm going to do a blank window. Okay. And you'll notice that this is for a phone right here, right? If at this point, excuse me, if at this point I do window and I do layouts and I add layouts to this, so I can have additional layouts. It doesn't have to be just for a phone, right? Now, here's all these layouts that we have, right? So at this point, you start putting your controls on your window that you work with. Now, you don't necessarily work with each layout separately for putting different controls on. You'll notice when we put a control on the window, it's going to show up on all the layouts. Now, what happens here is if I move this guy, right, you'll see that it moves on all the layouts. So it's not that you can have a separate layout of control placement. What it's going to do is take whatever controls you have and then make it fit in the layout. Now, let me show you this. Okay, let's just close this one down because I just wanted to show you how you create a new one from scratch. Okay, and maybe this will make it clear. We go back to our Windows Universal app here, and if I look at my screen, right, here's my layout for this screen. And you'll notice because the screen is large that this field is actually moved off the side here. Right now it's back on here. So what you'll need to do is accommodate the layout of your controls so it'll accomplish what you want on each of those layouts, but you don't have them in different positions. Because you notice when I did no name 1, right, and it was based on this template. Okay, this is the template that I created, and you can see how much larger it is, right, than any of the layouts. So what I've done here is I've used anchoring. So this says keep these controls at the right and at the bottom, and then take the looper and stretch it to the right, right? So now if I actually look at the window, now you'll see how that's positioned on here. I'd like to have had different positions for different controls, but I understand why you don't do that, because you want the layout to look the same on all the devices as much as possible. So it looks like this with that template. Now here's this layout, right? And then here's this layout. And what's really cool is we can take this layout, we can then run it. See what it looks like, and test it this way, right? Or we can go up to this guy and we can run this. And so one was a tablet in portrait. This is a phone in portrait. So what they've really done is, by having these layouts, is they've really isolated the user interface to some extent totally from the code. So no matter what device you run it on, it's going to run. Okay. So let's just step back of how we develop simple applications. And this first one is just going to be using Hyperfile. So let's run this. And notice they pretty much look the same. You can see data access is just a little faster. And so what we need to do to get this done, right, because we're using native files, we're not using web services, so we really have very little code. In fact, there's none here. The question becomes, how usable is it for you to use just Hyperfile database, Hyperfile Classic in here? So we don't have any code there. We do have a content. I'm going against my people table, which is in the analysis again, right? So we set this up just as if it were a WD application. And that kind of brings to a point here. This is Windows Universal Apps, so it works on the mobile devices as we've been talking about. But you'll notice that we're developing it in WD. We do not need WM at this point for developing Windows Universal Apps. So I think that's kind of cool that we can do that. So when we look at the maintenance form, it's just our regular coding like we normally have. We do a file to screen. And then we're going to just do our hadd or hmodify. And then once the data is saved, we just update the looper on the previous screen. So this is very simple. And if it were Hyperfile SQL, it would be the exact same coding. The only thing is we would be maintaining a connection of where the data resides. And then what I wanted to do is we take it from the simple up to just a little more where it's the same functionality, right? But again, this is based on a Windows template. So now you don't even have to write very much code at all, especially in the maintenance form. We create our window, we use the template, we fill in a variable right here that just says, hey, what is my update template going to, or my update form going to be? And then over here on the maintenance window, we actually have one more variable that we fill in, is what table am I working with to actually save the data. So if you use the Windows templates that have the controls built on them, right, and the maintenance form has got a little more work because we actually have to do the file to screen and screen to file. That works fine. But when we come down here to web services, which is probably the more practical way of getting your data, unless you're using Hyperfile client server to get to a server. And that's a design issue that you'll have to work out with if you want that, or just the web services. The web services are nice because it insulates your users from the data, and people aren't going to be able to get to the server itself because there's that intermediate layer, right? So what I had done is, this example is based on my interpretation, and I'm going to say that loosely, to web services because it's covered in our class, and we'll go over that again in our coding conference, coding camp. But I got tired of writing different web services for different applications, and if you had different tables, you'd have to create different structures for that and change your coding. And so I just figured there's got to be a little, in my idea, simpler or better way. Now, if you're going to be doing more advanced things, you'll want to look at Andy's coding camp and his classes of how he handles things, because it's more involved and gives you more functionality than what I provide here. But my thought behind this is take the same code pretty much that you write for local data access, you package it up in a string with the data, you send it up to a very generic web server that compiles it on the fly up there and actually does what you need it to do. So what you had to do is, well, let's step back here. Okay, project code. So while some of these things that I'm talking about here are not new in Windows Universal Apps, I'm still treating this concept of Windows Universal Apps as the new concept, because it just opens up a whole new area for us using existing techniques and existing coding. So when we use the web services, no matter where you do it, at some point you're going to have to define a structure that's going to hold the data, whether it's sending it up to the web service and the web service has the structure up there, or you're using it to return it, but you still have to declare the structure somewhere. And traditional web services, you'd be declaring your structure here, you'd be going up into your web service, and you would declare it up there, and you'd have to publish a new web service. I don't have to do that, because what I'm going to do is we're going to take this structure and we're actually going to send it up through code right in the web service up to the server. So what you have to do at one time, at some point, define your structure. And then what I'm doing is I'm actually then interrogating this structure to find out what the fields are, because then I can declare my fields and send them back and forth. And then another thing that we have to do is, if I want to update my data on the server somewhere, I actually build this through code, and you'll notice we've got %1, %2, %3. So, you know, at some point we're going to be using a string build that will actually put in those values. So, you know, in its simplest form, you create a structure, and then we just create this, the field template. Not a lot of coding. And then over here, I just use an array. Array generate is array of that structure that we saw. And then if we look at this looper control, we're using that array, just like we did when we generated the application, and we're using the stored variable. So the difference between this and what you had first seen me generate is I don't have to write any of that code that you had just seen. That gets generated for me. And then when we look over in, we'll go from here. Then I have to write this code. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually, this is where I make my call, hfilter_ws, and I try and keep it simple to how you do a web, how you do an hfilter in the W language. But this is a local procedure, and I send it a connection. I tell the table I'm working with, and I give it my my filter condition, sys_id is greater than 0, and then I send up those elements, and that's just what we looked at in the project code when we actually look at, or I'll call it, we scrape the structure to find out what fields and what data types are made up, and we send that here. Then this procedure, right, is this code here. We're wrapping everything up, okay? And this code is also included, so you don't have to write this. These are just procedures. And we actually just send this up to the web service right here. And you'll notice that this web service was written in version 17. So from 17 till 21, writing all these different applications and doing things, I've not had to change my web service. Okay. So I make the call to the web service, the data comes back. I receive it here, I deserialize it, and I do an array sort so I can get the data right in the format that I want and in the order that I want, because I'm sorting the array. So it's not a big deal to write the code for the web service, but if you remember when we generated it, right, I didn't have to write any code. This is what it generated, right? So because I selected the people table over in the code generator, it created this line. And then because of the sort fields, if we remember, I selected the last name and first name. I've got a search field I want to look up by last name. My search field type is text. If it's numeric, I need to know if it's text or numeric, whether I'm going to include a single quote in there. What my maintenance window will be, right? It built the structure for me. So this is equivalent to the structure we looked at in the project code, right? And then we initialize the array, and then we get those elements of that. So that's all generated. We have nothing that we have to write there. And then because this was a Windows template, right? It had, in fact, let's do this. It had the controls on here. And because it was a Windows template, it had all my data retrieval here and of calling the web service. So I did not have to write this. And if you'll notice that we're using the variables, right, of what we had defined that was generated from the code application, from the code generator. So really, we've not written any code. We've gone and we have used a Windows template, and then all we had to do was go into the content and add this one stored variable in here, right? And then I had to link my columns to display the data. And that's it. And so this now will run on all those different Windows 10 runtime platforms. The PC, the tablet, the phone, Xbox, and HoloLens. And they'll all render properly, which is really kind of amazing. Now, the next thing that I want to show you, and yes, this is at a high level. We've not gone through all the code line by line and looking at it and how you write it and how you do that. We will do that at the conference. I'm wanting to get people interested in WINDEV mobile, and I'm particularly falling in love with the universal apps just because to me they're so simple to do and to write. And I'm also thinking I can take this paradigm and move it over to Android because it's just as simple to write applications there too. It's just that PCSoft has now expanded this. Now, let me step through at the high level, and we will generate this. Okay. Yep, I don't care about those. Okay, so you can generate and deploy the application, which is nice. Now I could generate and deploy it, and I could install it on this PC and run it as if it were a PC, which is nice. So let's just step through this. The typical setup that we have for configuring this, okay. Now, these are everything that you can have access to or include. Of course, I don't need all of these things, but by default, it's there. Right? Any additional files, generate a new certificate or use a certificate found on the computer. To install applications on other devices, it has to have a certificate. Well, we're able to create a certificate when we create the application, which is kind of nice. Now, if you had a certificate that you purchased from somewhere else, I believe you could just select it here and use it. And as you create a new certificate, then it says, well, where do you want to put it? And as you do that, as you step through this, PCSoft gives you the hints or the instructions of where you should be putting it, in like in the root of the applications or whatever it happens to be. I don't remember offhand, but it does step you through that. And then it creates that install that you can then put on any other device, and you can install it on there and it runs. Okay. So as we're stepping through this, now that that's created, how do we want to deploy this? So we can deploy and start the application on the local computer, which is kind of nice. Deploy the application on a phone connected in USB, right? Or deploy the application on a network, right? And so if I would have selected earlier for the store, we could do that, but I'm just going to keep this here. And it's installing the application on this computer. And there is the PC version of this application, right? And let's see what we get here. We get the people service. We filter it. There's the data, right? And there's our. Now, the one thing that I'm not liking, and I need to figure this out more, as I select a record, I'm fine, right, with highlighting it until I let the mouse up. Now, I have no idea what record that I'm on. And even though I've said, yeah, go ahead and show the record that's highlighted, I'm just not, I'm missing something. So say it stays there, and now I modify that, and we go to our maintenance, and we're cool. Okay. And so now if this were installed on a phone or a tablet, you know, I mean, it will render properly. Now, granted, these are simple looking. I mean, the interface is not very nice at all. Just by default, we're using something very, very, very plain. And it looks like the Windows 10 architecture certainly are using flat controls and not 3D. But anyway, we have an application up and running now that will run on all those devices. Okay. And so what we're presenting at the conference will be this application here, and you'll walk away with this application. You'll also walk away with the code generator that will generate code, and we have plans for extending that generation for other platforms and other types of code generation. My next project for this will be to generate code for the maintenance forms. And
I'm going to look for it as to test it also for translation. So if you get something that's been written in French, something like that, I'm looking to see whether or not we can use this to Control-C, pick up the clipboard, translate it through Google Translate, and bring it back to you in English.
Hadn't even thought of that.
Yeah, well, I thought about it because I get the LST.
Right.
And trying to convert, you know, all of their documentation they put in there to English is cut, paste, cut, paste, cut.
Right.
Paste.
Right.
You know,
Right.
it drives me crazy. Well, so what I get to do is if I can do that, then I can take the LST data, I can do a cut, and then have it and just do a Control-V right there because it's ran through that code and it's ready to go. I think it'd be pretty cool.
And I have to give Andy kudos for some of this with the code generator, because we were talking about structures, and And with his classes, I mean, everything's based on structures in there, but he takes this a step further in that he will have a structure that could have fields for multiple tables.
Mm-hmm.
And so I worked on generating that code. So that will also be in the code generator. So then anybody who wants to do advanced work, more than just what I'm doing with these simple things here, it will at least cut down all that busy work they have to do creating structures.
And we all know how this is going to work. We're going to get it built up. It's going to work pretty well. We'll see it in version 23.
I'd love to see that. Because I'm not in the business of writing tools anymore, right?
And neither am I.
I don't want to support them, but if it helps our development, it's great. So anyway, let me do a recap on this, because to me this thing with PCSoft, with WINDEV, with Universal Apps is how utterly simple we can make it. You know, we don't have to beat ourselves around the block and hit ourselves in the head, you know, or run into a wall all the times. Is we can start off really simple. And I think this code generator, and whether you use it in a lot of your apps or not, that's not the point. The point is it can show you the basics of what kind of coding you need to do or things you need to implement. And then the great thing is, because we'll include the code generator, is you will be free to take that and modify it and have it generate any code that you want. So if you make web service calls using Andy's classes, go ahead and generate what you need to make those calls, or however you're going to implement it.
Yeah. Then always, please, you remember we have the repository up on the Google Plus area. If you've made some changes to it that you think is beneficial to everybody else, post up your version with a link to the backup of it so people could, you know, combine and see what you've done.
Right. Okay, let me step through this just one more time as a summation of how simple it is to do this. The tools that you'll be receiving at the conference, if you do come, and we hope you do because we just have a great time there. I'm going to, again, just create a new window, right? We're going to, oh yeah, new window. I've got to select based on a template. Here's our generation code template. Okay, here's our window already. Let us go to Windows. Let us add layouts to it so it works on all the platforms. Okay, that's done. And so you'll see here's those different layouts. We will now go over to the code generator. We will select the browse code, and we'll first name, last name, sysid, and this time we'll pick occupation. We're going to sort on the, we're going to search on the last name. We're going to sort on the fields. There's the code that it generated. We'll come back in here. We'll do a Control V. We will override the control. We will pick up, let me save this. Okay, yeah, it's added. There's our generate. It now recognized it. If you don't save your window at first with all those definitions in there, when you get to the controls, it says, I don't know what we have because this is not a saved form as of yet. I'll just pick the sysid, say okay. I will override this control. And let's do, we'll make that the sysid. Okay, we'll make this the last name, the first name, and the occupation. We will now run this. And there's our data. So literally in what, 2 minutes, we can have a browse form up with a looper retrieving your data from a web service. Now, the reason I created this is because if you'll notice, if we go to project, that full application RAD is not available from PCSoft, which is two things that I'd like to see them do. I'd like to see them do full application RAD. One, right now, that means they don't have RAD patterns for this. And two, they don't have RAD patterns for this means I can't have a RAD pattern for this. For those of you who have the training materials or seen the RAD patterns we've developed, we actually can create our own windows based on our own code and our own design. If we could do that in Windows Universal apps, I would create some RAD patterns and possibly not even have to have the code generator. It would just create all of this for us. But be that as it may, we now have a code generator, may have it for additional uses that I was even thinking of. And at least right now, you can get a Windows Universal app up and running in actually pretty little time. So that's what I'm covering today. The language keeps evolving within here, and so hopefully there'll be new features that they'll have. And just one thing, and then I am wrapping up. If we go to here, maybe I don't have it. Somewhere I do. Source to screen, screen to source is not available in the Windows Universal apps. Once they would give that to us, that would help cut down on coding that I would have to do in the generator. But regardless, we still can create that. We still can do it. Just small things that they keep on changing the language. So I look for great things with them because they always surprise you by the time, like Andy said, by the time you write something, they'll come up with it in the next version. So anyway, that's Windows Universal Apps treated as a new feature by itself. And hopefully we will see you guys at the conference.
Yes.
And for sure at the next Hangouts.
Absolutely. You need to go to www.WxDevCon.com and you can sign up for that for any one of the 3 courses. Now, to kind of let you know where things are going with this, this will be the only time that all 3 will be put on at the same time. What we'll be doing in the future after this is rotating the classes with new materials based upon whatever release once per quarter, and then the final quarter would be the developers conference for a couple of days, which is pretty much limits. It gives the last one to talk about the next version that's coming out, version 22 or 23 or whatever it may be, and that is pretty much going to be just a get together in central location in the United States where we can all sit back and talk about the next version, see what the new features are, have some examples of the new features, run them, and get together, and we'll announce that. Probably we'll have a time frame set down in April for that. And when we do, we're looking at doing it around the Dallas area for central location for everybody from the West Coast and East Coast. So y'all keep that in mind as well. We'll start putting up more information that way. So I want to be glad that everybody's been here this morning. Read this over. Any questions, please post at the bottom, and we'll be glad to get back and take a look at them. The better place to post any questions for this, and he will put his link on the YouTube for any downloads, is in the Google Plus community right underneath the event. Just go ahead and post your questions there. That way we know we get it. Okay? A lot of times the YouTube one, if you're posting things on the YouTube that is a question or stuff, it doesn't really come to us. We don't know about it unless we're over there at YouTube looking at it. So keep that in mind. Other than that, all I can say is y'all be good, or be good at it. Have a Merry, Merry Christmas and a very Happy New Year. Enjoy yourselves and hope everybody is safe throughout the holidays And I do pity everybody that's up north that is freeing. It is just freezing up there. You know, Glenn's warm. I'm cool. Y'all are freezing. See y'all later. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.